So, all right. Are you guys able to see that it's recording?
Yeah.
Yes, I can see.
Red blinking recording symbol in the top left.
Sweet. Okay. So I'll get started. Now, this is an overview of something called PWA Studio. It comes with Magento 2. Well, it used to come inside the code base, but now it's got its own repo. So I don't know what version they moved it out, but it's separate now, as far as I can tell. And so we'll just go over like what is a PWA, like how you could possibly do a PWA in a normal theme, and PWA versus a single page app versus a headless app. How to install PWA Studio, a little under the hood look at what it is, and then we'll talk about a few things that are kind of default in any PWA. So I just also want to give the primer up front that this is not really a deep dive. It's more like an introduction to terms and kind of a surface level introduction to this topic, because really you could study this for like a long time, to build an entire React app that connects to Magento. That's really what we're talking about when we're talking about PWA Studio. We're talking about the thing they built is a React app, which is you could think of it like decoupled the front end from the back end as almost like they're separate services, and then they talk to each other through REST, or in this case, I believe mostly GraphQL. So we'll go ahead and get to the first slide. What is a PWA? So a progressive web app is progressive by definition. Basically, what that P stands for is that it's anything extra or cool that it does beyond just a normal website is added like on top of. So an older browser, an older phone or whatever is still going to get the normal website version. But if you're able to, you get these cooler features. The second one, discoverable.
Hey,
like
Steve, someone's trying to join the meeting.
Oh, okay. Let me someone's knocking. Let me let him in. Let me also see if I can make you a co-host, Steve, and then you can let him in, because I'm not sure where they're knocking.
Okay, I'll admit all.
Oh, perfect. Hello, welcome.
Hey guys, sorry to keep you guys waiting.
Okay.
Looks like they don't have any audio.
Yeah. We'll just give them one more minute there.
Yeah.
Seems like they're joining. Thanks, Steve, for letting me know. I couldn't see that for some reason.
I didn't even see that, and you drinking from a mom mug.
You like that? My mom disappeared. There we go.
This background is killing me.
You don't like the background?
It's like stealing the show, man. It's like literally engulfing you.
Okay. So I'm guessing our new people who have joined can at least see, and looks like Tarandeep is still working on his audio there, but I'll continue.
Yeah.
So some of the things on this list, right, are going to be like basically something that an app could do or an app can't do, and isn't it so cool that a website can? And then there's some of the things on this list are something that a website usually would do, but isn't it so cool that an app can do that? So like the first one is kind of more of like a website thing. This second one is more of like an app thing where we're saying like um, uh, a big cool thing about a PWA is basically that it's a website and not an app, right? So it's you can find it in the search engines. You don't have to go to a app store. And then the second one is kind of the same thing. Like people can link to it and deep into it, like a normal website. Again, responsive. Again, like a normal website. And then we go the other way on this next one where we're saying like it's kind of more like an app than a normal website. So um, yeah, like an application shell model is basically what a PWA allows us to do using some new technologies is that um, you can have basically an offline view of your page that's loaded the first time, obviously, when you're online. But that, shell, the header and footer, maybe like some background color, that is cached on the user's device. So really that never has to get reloaded. And even if the user goes offline, they open up your web app and they still see that shell there. And then also, I mean, this part where it says minimal page refreshes, this kind of gets into another area, which is the SPA single page app model. So we're going to get into the difference between them, but really a progressive web app, there's, it's saying it here that it has minimal page refreshes, but that's not necessarily something you have to do to make it a PWA. This next one, connectivity independent, I already kind of talked about. Like, we're adding the ability for it to seem like it still sort of works when it's offline. Because normally, right now, if you go to some web page in your like Safari browser on your iPhone or Chrome on your Android, whatever, if you're not connected to the internet, even if you've been to that page before, it just shows a broken page. Like nothing is working here. Whereas if you had loaded like a PWA before and then you turned off your internet and went to it, you would see like a nice page that's still branded and it just basically says this site is offline, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they could do a couple of little things, but not much. So let's see, re-engageable. Yeah, so yeah, like this is one of the ones where we're saying like, oh, again, the website's more like an app. So people who use apps are more likely to reuse the app. So we're making it kind of more appish, so users are more likely to reuse your website. This is a big one, installable. So when you go to one of these PWA websites, you're going to basically prompt the user to say, hey, you can install this. It's like, it gets installed just like a normal app on the user's home screen of their device. So it could be an Android or an iPhone, not a Windows phone because they don't make those anymore. But I mean, it's possible you could still install it there. I was just trying to bash Windows phones, which probably isn't cool.
You're not getting sponsored by Microsoft now.
Yeah, no, I don't know. Yeah. So fresh, this one is like when you've published something new, the content should be made available inside the app. Again, this is kind of one of those ones where it's like we're just saying, hey, isn't it cool? The app is sort of more like a website now. And this safe one, it's also safe, just like a website or just like an app. And then here's the source. I will make this available. It has a ton more stuff in there, but this is the kind of top level overview of like just as a concept, what are we saying when we're talking about a progressive web app? Did anybody have a question about something in here? Okay, cool. I will move along. Now, so here's the thing, like we just said a big list of things and we could do all of that basically inside of a normal Magento 2 theme. So we could like extend from blank or just even use blank and build right on top of it, whatever you're going to do. Probably don't do that. But we can extend from blank or Luma inside of Magento 2 and make a normal progressive web app. Like there is no reason that you have to build like a React app or a Vue headless single page app to create a progressive web app. You can do all that without it. But and that's actually what the first version of the PWA Varigan theme, I think it's called Varigan, that they made. I can check actually. That's what it was. It was inside of Magento 2, and it was just a normal theme like Luma or Blank, and they had added PWA stuff to that theme. But then at a certain point, they kind of realized, well, what's the point of releasing this when we could kind of go all the way and make a headless single page app, which is what really, oh, there it is, Vina project is. That is a headless single page app built with React. So headless, in case you're not aware, is any website where the front end is decoupled from the back end. You could think of this like, if you know what microservices are, I'm guessing some of you are back end or server people, and I actually know that's true, that we're just splitting them into two and they communicate through the API. A single page app is a thing that you build in JavaScript. So you'll never see the page reload. As you go from like page to page, the content is injected into the original page that you loaded, and the URL, you can update that with the JavaScript if you want. You don't have to do that either. The page never reloads. So let's take a look at this. This is the PWA Studio React app running on my local host. If I just go to the home page, and then I'll take a look at the source, you can see that there's really nothing here. The only thing we have is a little bit of CSS. It looks like just for fonts. And then some Node.js like fallback stuff. And there's just nothing. There's no HTML. There's no CSS. There's nothing. All there is a JavaScript that's compiled, I think in this case, by Babel. And that JavaScript does everything. It injects the HTML, the CSS, and then when you click like anything, you're not actually going, you won't see the page like reload ever. You're just in the same page, the JavaScript is injecting new content into that same page. So we're still on the home page. We never have left the home page. That's what single page apps do. You always have been on the home page. You never left. And everything happens from the home page. So like this is cool in one way, but it also introduces a bunch of problems. Like, because if you think about it, we needed to deliver the whole website basically on the first load, right? Because like I said, you never left the home page and the page isn't going to reload. You have to give everything that's needed for them to experience the whole website. So once that problem's introduced, then you start getting solutions. And so things just become more complicated, and one of the big ones is like bundling. So you'll have, you're trying to deliver just what you want for, let's say, the homepage view, and not, let's say, what's needed for this PLP view. And that you actually saw that when it loaded, it did this loading thing. So yeah, I mean, it solves a problem, which is page reloading, and then it creates a problem, which is, well, now I have to give the whole app on the very first page load, which you don't want to do that either. So then you have to start solving that problem. So single page apps are very, very popular nowadays. Usually you would use like Vue.js or Angular was one of the first big ones to make single page apps. And React is more like low level. You can build SPAs out of React, but React isn't necessarily like an SPA library. React is really just the building blocks. You need to pull state management in and routing and all these things. Because I mean, like, even if you go to the React like docs, one of the things on here, at least last time I checked, maybe not anymore, was like, let's build tic-tac-toe, right? So their tutorials, yeah, here it is, tic-tac-toe, right? Well, I don't know about you, but I don't care about building tic-tac-toe. Like I want to build a website, right? So starting with React is kind of starting very, very low level, which is cool. I mean, to a certain degree, but something more like Vue or Angular, you kind of get the whole package in one with state management, routing. Like you're kind of just starting from a place of like, hey man, I'm going to build a website with this. I'm not building freaking tic-tac-toe, you know? So as long as you kind of understand that, I can move along. But I will say they did build the PWA studio using React. So, and a lot of websites use React. So I shouldn't crap on it. It's just there's a lot more to do yourself when you're building something with React, whereas Angular or Vue.js are more kind of opinionated, and the things are sort of done already for you to build an app with. Although I mean, some of it's still separated, like state management and all that. So let's talk about installing PWA Studio before we get too far into the weeds of like all that stuff. So it used to be that this was, I think, in like 2.2. Yeah, in Magento 2.2, this was a part of the repo. Like when you got Magento, you got PWA Studio in one of the folders. I think it was like dev slash something. Yeah, it was in here with like tools. It was in here with tools and all this stuff. But now you download it as its own repo, as you can see here. And yeah, I mean, it comes with all this stuff. There's just a few basic commands, like you pull the repo, and then, this is the setup, and then you clone the repo. Yarn is like npm. It's a newer package management solution invented by Facebook. So yeah, there you go. I've kind of explained what Yarn is. It's funny because I used npm to install Yarn. I wrote npm install Yarn, and then now to run PWA Studio, I'm running Yarn build and Yarn watch. It has its advantages. I've seen actually quite a bit of like more modern builds use Yarn of different technologies. So check that out. Okay, so now let's look at PWA Studio. We're going to go to packages / Vienna UI / templates to start poking around. So here it is. You can see what we have here. Close some of these. Yeah, what we have here is like, well, here's a shell, right? Here's a mustache template called a shell. Probably though, it's best to start with document open. So this mustache template, and I mean, let me see, yeah, what is mustache? We should talk about that first. Mustache is like, what is it like? It's a template language. So Twig or what's the older one? Yeah, it's template language. The thing that's different about Mustache is that it's logicless, right? So you can't do if statements or for loops or anything. That you can't write logic in your template. So that's what a Mustache template is, and that's what you're looking at right here. This is a partial. So basically, think about this file as getting consumed by the React app. I mean, you'll notice, for instance, some of these things are in the source code we looked at, like, oh, no, it's not. So yeah, this is all getting injected. Whereas if you use your inspector, you'll be able to see that this mustache template, the JavaScript actually injected at all. But it's not actually in the source code that you loaded, the JavaScript. After you loaded that first page, injected all of it into there. Yeah, the important thing in this file is just to kind of think of it as all of these mustache templates are being consumed by React and then spit out, injected to build your. It's like the building block HTML stuff to build it out. And you'll see right here, though, we are saying to link to a thing called manifest.json. This is really important for PWAs. And the PWA thing that we're talking about doing right here, let me go over one more, is, yeah, manifest.json. We are basically saying, yeah, here it is. What is a manifest? So this is like the core of what a PWA is. This is where we say, you know, does our little app, is it a normal web page or is it a full screen? Which would mean we don't have like a URL bar or a back and forward like a normal browser. Like it's loaded in the browser, but it's a full screen thing like an app. And we're also going to have in the manifest.json, let me open it up. Where did I keep it? Oh, okay. So the other thing we're going to have in there is like, what is our icon? And that's kind of where you get into the way actual apps are developed, because like they're not, normal, like an Objective-C or a Swift app for Android or iOS, they're not responsive. So if there's a different icon, for let's say iPhone 6 Plus versus iPhone 6, like it's slightly different size or whatever, you have to include both. And that goes for a lot of things inside of apps, but especially, well, not especially, but including icons. So your manifest file, let me make this a little bigger, will do this type of thing where, you're basically going to click, yeah, add to the home screen. You've added it, right? And you can automate that. You can make it cooler. So that now is your progressive web app, the little arrivals thing. See how it loads, and you don't see in this video. Oh, let me, and you don't see like right now. See how it's loading? There's no URL bar at the top. There's no like browser navigation stuff at the bottom, and you have a little loading icon of whatever you want. So it really does feel like an app. And this is all enabled by manifest.json and a service worker. This step, though, where like they right click in the top right and then they click to add to home screen, yeah, you can do that manually, or you can prompt your user with like a special little link to do that too. So you don't have to force them to do it manually. And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of this is your config for your PWA. And like I said, you don't have to build a headless single page app to do this. You could stick one of these into a normal theme. And do a lot of these things just in your normal theme, like take that incremental step of turning a normal Magento theme into a PWA. Cool. And then, spend the next year building your headless single page app, because that takes a long time. This doesn't take that long. And it's pretty cool. Does anybody have any questions about the manifest?
So so the manifest file essentially allows you to put in some top level configurations that kind of create a shell for your application is what I'm getting from this.
Yeah, well, it is top level configuration. Take a look at it real quick. Oh, let's actually click on this. I'll just show you real quick. So there it is. Okay, and then there we go. Manifest, and it looks like this. So yeah, I mean, you're basically just telling it like what the, you know, you're giving a web page app configurations. So like, what is the icon for these different uh, screen sizes? You know, which icon? Because see how they each have a different icon. It's a very app developer thing to do, but you have to do it because since it's like an app, right? And then the start URL. You're saying when they click on this icon on their desktop or on their, it could be a desktop. Yeah, I mean, it could be whatever. We're going to load this URL and what does the display look like? What is the orientation? What's the background theme and color? Just, yeah, like it's like an app shell. It's a good way to put it. Yeah. So, okay, the next thing is a service worker. It's needed, right? It's a part of this. To put it simply, it's a script that your browser runs in the background. So it's separate from the web page, and it opens it opens a door to features that you don't need a web page or user interaction. It is the thing that enables offline mode and push notifications on browsers that support it. And there's a primer here. You can see this primer. It's extensive. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff involved in a service worker. Um, for me though, and for the purposes of this presentation, even the purposes of like of installing a web app, you really, I mean, PWA, you're just going to make a very simple service worker, and you don't have to know all this stuff about it. I mean, it's nice, it's interesting, but it's not like, you know, if you learn all that, you're going to be um, really kicking butt in the PWA world or something. You only need a small one for enabling a PWA. There is this concept I want to introduce called upward. Now, according to Magento, this is a specification that enables developers and administrators to describe a middle tier and or back-end, front-end architecture that cannot include arbitrary business logic. Um, so this thing, upward, has been built into the PWA Studio React Headless app that Magento built. Let me show you something real quick though. So I was reading a lot of this page to try to explain what it is or try to understand how it works in relation to this. But I mean, I got through a lot of it, and what I kind of think for myself is that they have invented something here that other React apps that have like, let's say you build, you know, a React front end and a Laravel back end, right? The way those two things communicate with each other usually would be through GraphQL or possibly some REST stuff going on. They are enforcing a stateless middle tier, right? So upward, they have now invented this thing, and sits in between your React app and Magento. Um, if you're using the PWA Studio solution, you don't have to do that either. But if you're going to start with what they have, now this is kind of where I land on it. See right here, it says, you know, one of the objections is necessity. To me, it is unclear what problem this standard solves. I honestly, I read this thing like twice, and there's a lot of technical jargon in here. And I'm not like a single page app expert who is trying to tune the thing to its absolute peak performance, but I am a little, how should I say, skeptical of Magento inventing some new standard for headless apps. You know, their kind of ideas and stuff to me have always kind of seemed maybe like a very advanced computer science person coming down and then you know, trying to build a web app almost like a if someone who knows Java really well were to build a PHP app, to me, that's kind of what I feel like is going on inside Magento. It's not people who, and this is just my experience, but I'm going to put it out there. The people who built this, or not my experience, my opinion, and then the people who built Magento in general aren't like building tons of websites and having a ton of experience with like Laravel and React, and then going in and building some solution that kind of fits what other people are doing in the industry, and makes sense and is kind of a similar solution to that. No. Magento and the people who are behind it and building it are like senior software engineers who know how they want something to act, and then they take the technologies that are around and they make their app act that way. And then you come in, right, and you kind of look at it and go, huh, okay, like this is different than everything else, and how it works. And I think that's what they did here again, is that they decided that React apps and PHP backends aren't good enough, and that there should be a thing in the middle that does stuff and has some benefits, and they're very long and there's graphs. So I couldn't honestly get to the bottom of this, but at least they did note at the bottom here, like, not everybody even understands what what this is. So sorry, I couldn't get to the bottom of that one for you. And that's it for this one. That's the big talk. I hope you guys at least got something out of it, at a high level, and learned maybe a new concept or something. So thank you.
I learned
Thank you.
that Magento is not going to sponsor this meetup because
Who told you that Magento not gonna sponsor?
he's saying that Magento wants to reinvent the world of software development, and they're not.
That's what they do all the time, and they also know it. So
Maybe they'll take it lightly, or maybe they'll put a target on Steve T's back. No, but great job on the on the explanation. It gave me a better understanding of this whole PWA, how PWA works within Magento. I did have a question. So now that the PWA repo is separate from the Magento repo, do you still have access to the some access to the Luma and blank themes, or no access to that anymore? You'd have to recreate that.
Oh yes, no. So they that is totally separate, and it would like, so that, I mean, really, when you're really thinking about this setup, you would think of the Luma and the blank theme. They really are part of the backend. They're part of the monolith of Magento, whereas this is just a totally separate thing that you only are going to interact with Magento through the API.
Nah.
And I will put it out there too. I should have mentioned it in this talk. Almost everybody that I talk to that does front end in Magento 2 is pretty sure that, you know, probably by next year or 2 years, nobody is going to build normal Magento 2 themes, like based off of Luma and Blank. I'm not convinced it's going to be everybody switching to this PWA Studio thing. It's a pretty different approach than a lot of people would probably use, but it's going in this direction. Magento set up the back end, at least, to have GraphQL to a certain extent that it's needed, and I think most sites, if they're going to be built in 2021 or 2022, are going to at least consider not doing it inside of the normal Magento backend.
yes, and that's the idea. That's the idea with the 2.4, where they are more inclined toward microservices, and they are going away or going away from their monolith process. And that's why they have a separate theme Venia for PWA, so that people can be more contribute towards it. And let's say a year down the line or 2 year down the line, you don't need to go on to that monolith architecture where you are still working with the Luma. And for the mobile, either you have to optimize or you have to come up with a mobile app. And that's again comes with more overhead, where you have to create a mobile app for iOS then Android. And that's where the plan is, I believe.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I think a lot of sites are going to keep their old stuff. I mean, there's still sites on Magento 1.9 that are staying there, but new sites that get built are going to be built more modern style.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem that headless is kind of the direction that they want to go into. I mean, especially since more like you guys said, I mean, native apps are kind of convoluted. I mean, not convoluted, but they're more restricted in terms of being able to adapt to different screens, and then you need a desktop version. I mean, then you need a website and you need an app versus having it all in one.
Yes, and you need an app which can work on different devices. So you have to either create different apps for all those devices, or create a
Yeah.
universal app in some language like React Native, and generate the build for all those different devices. So that's where it brings in more development cost, more complexity, more technology. And PWA somewhere solves all those issues. And to add more in here, Magento had no plan for PWA until last 2 years, when they saw that there are competitors like Vue Storefront and Deity, who have their front end built up, which can run headless with Magento, and then Magento has to come up with their own PWA.
Right.
Oh, so you're saying there were solutions that were leveraging the Magento?
Oh, there are already Vue Storefront, then there is Deity. They are all available to run Magento as headless, and it's all open source as well.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
there's
No, it's not Drippy, it's Deity or Diety.
oh, Deity. Yeah, that's right. And they Deity, they really are going full blown. Like they have their own server, they have their own application tier, and they
Yep.
have they have a lot built out. Yeah, and then I'll just put one more out there. There's Scandy Web,
Yeah.
PWA. There we go. Scandy. I don't know if there's much like real. I don't know if they have great demos, but this is one built for Magento. And then there's also React Storefront that claims Magento 2 integration. The thing is, with these, I know from my research anyway, the Use Storefront one is a very mature solution that does connect well. But I think a lot of these, I haven't done a lot of research, but you will probably have to build quite a bit yourself to customize and make sure that the Magento app does what you want.
Yep.
I did have
Yeah,
a question about the product, the problem you brought up with PWAs, where if you're trying to, since the page doesn't reload, right, and you never leave the front page, you were saying that, you know, how do you limit the content that's shown and like make, I don't know, just show maybe a PDP instead of like, you know, showing other content that's on the page. I don't know if did you mention one of the solutions to that?
Yeah, so I mean, basically, it's a pretty standard solution that they came up with, like when they started doing single page apps, which is really on the first page, you're just loading the shell, so header, footer, maybe a background color or something, and then there's kind of a call into the back end to get the JavaScript and CSS and everything needed for whatever route, they call them routes, whatever page you're on.
Okay, so kind of static header and footer, and then just the content in the middle changes.
Right.
The container changes, yeah. Okay.
And I mean, that actually is kind of hard to do, but there's, it's a pretty basic step you have to do to make a single page app. So
Trash have to do this. Fell off.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
It's all good.
I didn't realize I was unmuted.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of pre-built stuff out there already.
No, this is really cool. Thanks.
Oh yeah, here's
for-
the just real quick. Sorry. Here's their Falcon Deity setup, and you can see they have an API manager, an extension manager, proxy, caching. It's all and I mean this. I don't even think of this necessarily as like open source. You're kind of doing vendor lock-in, but at a certain point, I don't know. I think it's probably worth it to get there quicker.
I mean, yeah, like flexibility is good, but then sometimes that brings complexity, right? So it's probably easier to just lock into a specific solution.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that personally I'm running into right now is justifying the switchover. So to build basically a whole new front end for Magento 2, it's going to take a lot of time and effort and planning. And, what do you get out of it? Well, some speed, basically. The site goes faster. It seems more like an app. Like it's not. It's hard. It's not a great, easy, super quick sell unless people are really knowledgeable and they know, hey, this is coming. Everyone's going to do it this way. So kind of have to go down that selling point of why am I going to spend all this money to make my website act like this? Am I really going to get that big of a boost? And there's some data that shows it's going to be really good for conversions. So.
And I mean, the React app has to sit on a separate server, right? So there's infrastructure changes there.
Yeah. So that's a good question. The React app could sit on a separate server, or I think possibly you could deploy it directly to the edge, right? So you could stick this thing onto a CDN, I think.
I guess, yeah, you can have both the app on the same server. It has to be on different ports. So for the React, you have to have different port.
You're saying okay.
I was going to say people tend to do it on separate servers for cost effectiveness, since you can utilize smaller servers that way. But
yeah,
okay.
so I guess what I was getting at, and I didn't want to confuse it, is there's a thing. So there's a kind of a what's it called? Okay, I can't remember the name of it. But there's also a new concept out there where, basically what people are trying to do is deploy their front end directly to the edge. So let's put all of our JavaScript and HTML and CSS directly onto our CDN, no server, and just have it communicate back using the API. I don't think that's what these guys are all doing yet. And yeah, they're probably right. There's just a separate server for the React app.
Yeah. Just so Cloudflare would have the front end that would be stored on. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some problems there, right? Like that they overcome in different ways. One of the big ones I think that is doing something like this is Gatsby. You've probably heard it's like a blogging static. So it's kind of going towards that static side, but you can't really do a static commerce store, right? So you have to have stuff that's like the cart and API calls.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Cool deal. Thanks, guys. I don't know. Do we want to try to plan the next one?
Yeah, I mean, and you're gonna be surprised by this, Steve. I was thinking about doing one on Docker.
Nice. I would love that.
Valet.
It's only
Why not
though.
Valet?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, why not Valet?
Well, because like I think I actually like Docker now.
Yeah, yeah. But can you do a bit about Warden?
I don't know.
Come on.
Maybe you can do that.
Okay.
I can do something on Docker or on Valet Plus, definitely. But I've been like kind of messing around with Docker, like, and basically at my new place where I'm Magento Cloud, everything's container based. So like I've kind of like done a deep dive into containerizing all the services from the database and the PHP stuff into, yeah. So anyway, I think I've kind of like nailed the process down pretty well. And I know like I'd probably be able to like eliminate some pain points for people that have tried to use Docker, but kind of got lost in all the, I guess, the learning curve of learning how like all the containers like network with each other and, you know, how to set up a Docker file and all that stuff.
Awesome.
But
I'm looking forward to it.
Deep, are you interested?
Definitely. So yes, and there are plenty of what we call it environment right now. It's like Valet Plus, Warden, then we have Docker, and the other one we used to have is which is gone.
Ma'am?
Yeah. Yes, but Docker gonna be interested, and Magento Cloud Docker is yes, that is more interesting if that works in just one go. Because I tried that Docker image from Magento a year ago, and it had lots of challenge. Now it is more mature, hopefully. But yeah, did not play with it, but that would be nicer to have. Yeah.
So yeah, in the last 2 weeks, I've like done a few different versions, like iterations of the Magento Cloud Docker setup, right? With different versions of PHP and with, you know, different types of cache, etc. Right? And also Magento introduced the ECE tools package, which kind of like automates a lot of that setup for you. And
Yes.
and I mean, you can, I know they set it up specifically for the cloud, for Magento Cloud, but honestly, you could modify it to, you know, run Magento regular, you know, Magento
It's
community
a
or
big learning curve where you have to dig into ECE tool as well, and then you can customize it the way you want it.
Well, that's what I want to like I kind of I took like a whole, my first task at this new company that I'm at was to create a reliable Docker environment, and like I kind of pounded my head, like kind of did a lot of work over like just trying to get it work for like a week and a half, and like I learned a lot of stuff in that time period. So yeah, I just wanted to do a quick video. Maybe it'll help alleviate some of those issues. Maybe someone will see the video. Maybe it'll help one of you guys.
And that the problem is gonna be like, for example, if you're working on a Mac OS, and you can obviously help all the developers who are using Mac OS, but that thing not gonna work on Linux or Windows machine.
So the only difference between the setups would be introducing Docker Sync on
Yeah.
on Mac OS or on Windows, or not even Docker Sync Mutagen, because Mutagen is going to become officially supported, like the official syncing mechanism supported by Magento moving forward. I think I read that somewhere in the docs. Anyway, I'm on a Linux machine, which doesn't require any of that. So yeah, the setups, but so obviously on a Windows machine or on a Mac, it's you have to add that extra component, and there are
So
some issues there.
for the Windows,
Yeah.
lately Windows 10 came up with WSL, so Windows sub Linux systems, something like that. So using that, it's get easier.
Yeah. The syncing port, yeah, getting your files to sync is a huge issue. But honestly, for me, when I initially started with Magento, I couldn't even. It was, I mean, given that I mean, I didn't have much guidance anyway. But I tried to set up a Docker environment, and like I was kind of lost when it came to like reading all the documentation. It just introduced a huge learning curve for me. But yeah,
Yeah,
now
and
it,
honestly, dude, that
yeah,
that is totally, I think, any Magento. Well, it was my experience because
yeah,
especially when Magento 2 came out, that was about the time I switched off of MAMP, right? Like,
yeah,
so it was like I had to learn Magento 2 and Docker, and I couldn't separate, like, am I having a problem with Docker or am I having some Magento 2 problem, right? Like, so that was a great talk. And I just want to answer Kevin's question real quick. Why not Valet? I would say, like, the reason at our company we switched off of Docker and went to Valet is because we had a weird kind of bad Docker setup. And a good Valet setup is better than that Docker setup. But I think a good Docker setup is better than a good Valet setup, probably. So
yes.
What? I know. I was essentially just pulling Steve's leg. I just wanted to how he'd respond. But yeah, definitely Docker is the way to go in terms of a proper setup. It's just the way that him, who we not say his name, had originally set it up. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, along, so you guys know he's the one that kind of like gave me my initial introduction to Docker. And then kind of like when I was playing around with Docker and going through the documentation,